think we should dim the lights to make it more visible, or is it good?
Yeah, I think
Do you want to try turning the light off? It's right next to you, I think. See if that. Yeah, actually, maybe let's just do one.
Just this one.
Yeah. Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay. I think it'll be okay. So, are we good to go?
Yeah, we're good to go.
Okay. Hi, welcome to the Pandoc session. So, the question that I had last night when I was listening to these very interesting talks with beautiful, elegant abstractions was, why am I here? Because I'm a philosophy professor. I've never taken a computer science course in my life. You know, though this is the kind of question you might expect a philosophy professor to ask, I actually mean it in a very mundane sense. But I think the answer is that I created a virus that spreads GHC, which is Pandoc. So here's a couple of, you probably can't read them, but they're tweets where people are saying, well, darn it, I wanted to install Pandoc, and then I had to install the whole Haskell platform. So I figure Pandoc is responsible for a good amount of the propagation of the Haskell platform around, sometimes unwillingly. I think Pandoc might actually be the most popular open source Haskell application written in Haskell, aside from GHC itself, of course. So it's a fairly popular project, and I think that's why I'm here, despite my lack of any interesting theoretical credentials. Now, how did this come about that I wrote Pandoc? Just a brief autobiographical sketch. When I was a kid, I liked to play with computers, and that there was the first computer I ever had, which is a Kim 1 with 1K of memory that you programmed directly in machine language, that I got from my grandfather, who I think was one of the first computer hobbyists. So I had a youth where I was programming things like that quite a bit, and then through college I worked at a national lab programming in Haskell on these mini computers that had huge 20 megabyte hard drives. And then, you know, about the time when Windows 3.0 came out, I sort of stopped doing any programming, got out of it for a long time. Then about 2004, I installed Linux on my machine and got interested again. Started messing around with it, learned Python and Ruby, and did some Lisp and Objective-Camel. And then finally, I heard about Haskell from a logician friend of mine, Greg Restel from Australia. And it really clicked with me. I thought this is a really neat language. So I thought, well, what could I do? I was just really learning it. I said, what could I do in Haskell that would be a way to learn it? And I had been, at the time, I was keeping most of my lecture notes and so on in restructured text using DocUtil's toolchain to convert it to different formats. And I had come across this Markdown thing that John Gruber had invented, and I said, well, maybe I'll try writing a parser for Markdown using this parsec library. Because Markdown's really a kind of horrible language for parsing. So for example, an asterisk could be an opening delimiter for emphasis, or a closing delimiter for emphasis, or part of an opening or closing delimiter for strong emphasis, or it might just be an asterisk, depending on the context. So I started messing around with parsec and wrote this parser for Markdown. At the time, I don't think there was anything to parse Markdown other than basically big strings of regular expression substitutions. So it worked pretty well. It was much faster than the Perl script. It was easier to maintain. It was more correct. And then I thought, well, this is kind of neat because I can make my own tool, and then if I want a feature, I can add it myself. I said, but I've got to get all my old stuff from restructured text over. So then I wrote a parser for restructured text so I could get it in. Then I needed LaTeX output, so I added that. And before long, I had something, and eventually something inspired me to release it. That's the first release right there. And then soon after that, I was contacted by a Debian maintainer, Rejai Aktash. And so it actually got pretty early into the Debian repository, and I was just sort of committed to maintaining this thing forevermore. So that's how I got into Haskell. And some of the code that I wrote when I was just learning Haskell is, I'm afraid, still in Pandoc. You might find it if you ever look at the code. But I think this is a great way to get into the language. Those of you who are just beginning, just find something that you're interested in, just start writing it and see what happens. So after that, I started needing more libraries. So I wanted to have code highlighting, but Pandoc's readers and writers were all pure. They were just functions from string to string. So I didn't want to shell out. I couldn't really shell out and call pigments or something like that to do the code highlighting. So I wanted to write a pure highlighting library. So I wrote this library that basically does code generation. It takes Kate editor's syntax definitions, and it writes Haskell parsers using parsec that it then compiles. So that's highlighting Kate. And then I wanted to eventually get into doing things like ODT, which is a zip container. So I wrote a zip archive parser, and then I wanted to handle LaTeX math and be able to convert it to MathML and later on to the format that Microsoft Word uses. So I wrote TechMath, and Andrea Rosato wrote this thing called CiteProc HS, which processes citations using the citation style language. And I later made that into something called Pandoc CiteProc, which I'll explain in a bit. And I also ended up writing a wiki that uses Pandoc. So I just kind of got dragged by the nose through all this Haskell. Now, let me give you a quick demonstration. Some of you may be familiar with Pandoc, but I just wanted to show some of the things that it can do for those of you who don't know about it. So it works like a Unix pipe. You can just type stuff, and it'll, by default, give you markdown to HTML. You can use various options, like if we want smart quotes, we can use the smart option. We can go to MediaWiki instead. We can go from LaTeX, say, to Markdown. Here's an example text file, and there it is converted into Markdown. Sorry, the column width is a bit off because I had to enlarge this. Then you can, if you do help, it will show you all the options and the various formats that it supports. You can use the standalone or small s option to create a standalone document with a header and footer and so on. So I'll give you an example of that. Use smart quotes. We use the Pandoc README. We'll make it called r.html, and we'll make it HTML5. Okay, so now we can open that up, and there it is, as you'd expect. Now, if you want to, you could, for example, add a table of contents. You could add your own CSS, and then it would look like that. So it's got a lot of options that you can look at. Now, the way that standalone works is it uses a document template, which has little spaces for various metadata variables and so on, and the document body. So to give you an example of that, the big D option will give you a default template. I'll save it as my.html5. And now let's edit that. And you can see kind of how it works. Down here, there's the body. Up here, there's the title, date, and so on. So at the end of the header, let's insert a new list that will give us the version history. Okay, so we're going to use a for loop for version, list item, version, and this is structured data, so we'll have the version number and the version date, and then the version log. Okay, so now we'll take a file. Let's take sample1.txt, and in Pandoc you can use a kind of YAML metadata at the top of the document. And as you can see, the metadata is structured, and it's basically kind of like YAML or JSON or something in terms of the structures that are allowed, except that instead of raw strings, things are interpreted as Markdown. So as you see, we've got a list here of versions with number, date, and log. And if we process this with standalone, and we'll tell it to use my template that I just saved, we should get something like that. Well, that doesn't look right, does it? What did I do wrong? I must have forgotten to
Did you terminate your?
terminate my for loop. Yes. And if Pandoc were better, it would have told me that. So if somebody wants to hack on Pandoc this weekend, maybe you could fix the template module. There. Okay, we got our versions. Okay, now this has math in it, and if you want, you can do, let's do math jacks, so it will look better. Why didn't it? Okay. Don't know. Maybe because, yeah, by default, the math jacks will try to get stuff off the web, the math jack scripts, but I'm not connected. Anyway, so you can also make a PDF, and there Pandoc will simply run LaTeX through LaTeX source through LaTeX, or you can make, for example, a Word document. There's a Word document, and one of the neat things about it is that the LaTeX math actually gets converted to native Microsoft Word equations. Okay, so that's fun. Now, let's look at another thing. I just added a little bit here. So I added this line, bibliography. This is a BibTeX bibliography. Sample 2. There it is. Normal BibTeX bibliography. And at the end, I stuck in a couple lines here with citations. That's a citation format that Pandoc uses. And now we can run that. And we're going to tell it to use a filter. I could use filter called Pandoc CiteProc, which will process the citations. And we're going to output another Word document here. And if you see, the Word document now contains resolved citations and a bibliography. And now it's in a author date inline format. But if we want to, we could put in this line, which says which CSL style sheet to use, and there are thousands of these things available. And now we'll take a look at that. Except it didn't work because I think I need to close this first. There. So now you see, instead of the author date in parentheses, we have a footnote citation format, and you can't see the note because it's at the bottom of the page, but there it is. So you can kind of seamlessly go between different citation formats, just like you can do in BibTeX, except you can use it in any format that Pandoc supports. In theory, you could even do, citations in your man pages this way. Okay, so that's CiteProc. So just to illustrate that, we'll make an org mode file. And you look at it in Emacs, and here's the bibliography. Okay. Now, one more thing, or a couple more things to show. So, source code highlighting. So here's how you can put in some source code, and we indicated it was Haskell. We set the number of the lines. You can also do inline source code. And so if we Pandoc that, let's make a PDF. there it is. So it's colored and highlighted. You can, again, it's supported in various formats. You can do it in a Word file. You can do it in HTML. It'll use the same highlighting. You can change the highlight style as well if you want different coloring. And then one more thing I wanted to show you is that Pandoc actually, for you Haskell people, supports literate Haskell. So here's a literate Haskell file. And if you don't know anything about literate Haskell, it's just basically a text file where certain lines are marked out as Haskell code. And you can load that directly into GHCI or compile it with GHC. So you take this, and if you tell Pandoc that you're dealing with a markdown plus literate Haskell file, it will recognize those things as code and produce highlighted Haskell code for you. Or if you want to, oops, OSX is being too smart on me. You could convert it to the LaTeX literate Haskell form, where you have the code in